Hello and welcome back to the Art of Selling with Chloe. So today we are getting into why men and women sell differently and how to use this as an advantage for us as women. And we're going to be covering the actual science behind it, like the actual neuroscience and the biology and the hormones. I've done so much research into this episode, hence why I'm recording on a Thursday and not on Monday. I had to do lots of due diligence. And I really wanted to make this really juicy with lots of actual facts and information. And we go into it during this episode, what is literally happening in your brain and body when you sell, and then the spiritual layer underneath all of that. And why, as women, we are not just capable of being great at selling, we are actually wired for it when we do it the right way. Because I personally think there is this enormous misconception that sales is a man's world. I'm sure we've heard it so much, and I get why people think that. The loudest voices in sales tend to be men. A really good example, look at The Wolf of Wall Street, the movie. The men came on top, and although there are women in the film, and there are actually women selling the stocks as well in the movie, but they're not main characters. Now, this was filmed back in the 80s, or it was based off back in the 80s when women didn't have much of a voice. We were born, we were housewives. We were born into a very different life back then. Or if we did work, it was reception jobs or being sort of pushed to the side. And within that movie, there was a lot of aggressive closing tactics, this Lamborghini content, the never take no for an answer stuff that's predominantly very, very masculine energy. And a lot of women look at that and go, well, that's just not me. Therefore, I can't be good at selling, so I'm not built for this. And now what I want to go through today is teaching you how to completely dismantle that belief, because the science, the actual peer-reviewed research tells a very, very, very different story. When I was doing my research for this episode, I actually found a study of over 30, I think I've said this before in another episode, and this study is so amazing. I've got it written in my notes because I bring it up a lot. But this is an actual fact that there was a study that came out that there was over 37,000 salespeople across, I think it was, 89 companies found that women outperform men in sales by 1.5. And when women are in sales leadership roles, that gap doubles. So therefore, women-led sales teams have higher win rates than male-led sales teams. And I've personally ran sales teams before and have been in many female-led sales teams. In fact, one of my, I think it must have been my second or third job I had, my boss was a female. It was like an agency. We were doing marketing, and I worked for a newspaper. And I actually wrote about her in my book. She taught me so much about leadership and how to incentivize teams. She had this amazing thing that she would do to incentivize us. She would say, right, the next person who gets a sale would get a scratch card. And it was such a lovely, fun, interactive thing. It taught me to become it showed me how competitive I actually am, because I really, really wanted to get these scratch cards. But nonetheless, these female-led sales teams were the ones that performed the best, and they had increase in revenue, and overall morale of the team increases when led by a woman. So we are not at a disadvantage. We are operating with a different set of tools. And once you understand what those tools are and how to use them properly, everything changes. So today, we are going to cover the key biological differences that affect how men and women sell. We're going to look at the science of oxytocin and why it literally is your secret weapon when it comes to selling. We're also going to cover why the masculine model of selling is becoming less and less effective, and what selling from your feminine actually looks like in practice. And this is going to be such a fun episode. I have this question a lot. In fact, when I was getting into more sort of like high ticket sales, and I was really, really upping in my career, I remember saying to a coach of mine, I was like, what is the difference between selling to a man and a woman? And they couldn't really answer me. This was like 4 years ago. And they couldn't really answer me. They were like, well, there isn't really any difference. And I just remember thinking there must be a difference. there must be a difference. Like there's two genders and they are very, very different. So there must be a different way that we as women sell versus men. So I want to get into the biology first, because I think when you understand what is actually happening in your brain and body during a sales interaction, it really helps to reframe everything. So the big one is there's a chemical called oxytocin. You've probably heard about it before. It's the chemical that's named after love. It's the love hormone, basically. And in men, oxytocin does something similar, and in men, oxytocin does something quite specific. Research from the University of Haifa, I think I'm saying that right, found that when oxytocin is released in men, it actually sharpens their ability to identify competitive relationships. So therefore, it makes them more alert to status and hierarchy and who's winning and who's losing. So when a man is in a sales conversation and oxytocin is flowing through them, his brain is partly tracking the competition. Am I winning this? Am I closing this? Which in turn is great. And it's why men are so good at selling, because they have this chemical pushing them to be more competitive and they have this fire. However, in women, it's completely different. Because when oxytocin is released in women, it enhances our ability to identify kinship, things like connection. Who do I trust? Who do I feel safe with? Who is like me? And that is not a weakness. This is incredibly powerful in sales, because what do people buy from? They buy from people they feel connected to, people they trust, and people that they feel safe with. And women do naturally produce more oxytocin than men. That is a scientific fact, especially during social interaction. So literally, just by being in a conversation with a prospect, your brain is helping you build connection automatically. Isn't that extraordinary? Like, isn't that insane? We are just doing it without even thinking about it. Automatically, we are able to build a connection because the oxytocin is flowing. And then there's this stress response. There's this high level stress response. And when men experience stress, which can happen in many situations, high stake calls, or just anything in general, their bodies flood with testosterone and cortisol. And their amygdala, I'm sure you've heard that word before, their amygdala activates and they go into fight mode, which is why you get very, very aggressive push through objections, close at all costs energy from this like male salesperson, which is really how I was taught to sell when I was really young. I was 18 years old and I was taught to sell by men in door to door. And I did really well. Don't get me wrong. I was amazing and it really helped me. And I'm so glad I learned from that. But it's not always a strategy, because sometimes it's literally your biology responding to pressure. And it's a really dangerous place to sell from, because you can end up going into very, very deep, dark places, which is really where I went when things went wrong. And the reason why I had to leave that job. So, because now when women experience stress, however, we produce more estrogen and oxytocin. And one of the things oxytocin does is reduce the amygdala activity. So it actually calms us down, which means we are more likely to stay regulated in a difficult conversation. And I've noticed this, especially in the last, I'd say 3 years. I've noticed how I've learned how to lean into my feminine intuition selling, which in turn has helped me really disassociate myself from anything that's high stress. I'm able to take myself away from it. And I actually have really learned how to tap into that. And you can actually stay more regulated in a really difficult conversation. You're more likely to listen and hold the space rather than push harder. And that regulated, calm, connected energy is exactly what makes a prospect feel safe enough to say yes. And I'm sorry to say this, but men are often wired to close, but women are often wired to connect. And in today's market, connection closes more deals than closing. And I just want to say that this is absolutely not a thing. And there's also a fascinating research there's a lot of fascinating research about listening as well. I think I've spoken about this a lot in other episodes as well, but there's the part of the brain linked to listening, which is more developed in women on average. And hiring managers across multiple studies consistently rate listening as the single most important factor in sales success, above technical knowledge, above closing skills, above almost everything else. If someone wants to hire, they want someone who can actually listen, who can be a good communicator. And there's research involving I think it's 37,000 salespeople showed that women are better at what they call a discovery mindset. So you look at actively listening, not just to what someone says, but what they mean, picking up on things beneath the surface, noticing what they're not saying. And the ability to hear someone is what lets you offer them exactly what they need, not what you think they need. So that's the biology part. Now let's talk about the spiritual layer, because I think the two go hand in hand. In many, many, many ancient and spiritual traditions, feminine energy is described as the receiving energy, the magnetic energy, the energy that draws in rather than chasing them out. And masculine energy is the doing, the pursuing, the going after. And what's fascinating is how perfectly that maps out onto the neuroscience. The oxytocin responses in women and the connection, the trust building, the listening, the calm presence, that is the receiving energy. That is magnetic selling. You're not chasing the sale. You're creating the conditions where someone feels so understood and so connected that they want to come to you. They want to work with you. And I talked about this in a few episodes back in the feminine energy episode, but there's this beautiful way of describing feminine energy, which is feminine energy is this ocean, this big sea of ocean, and masculine energy is a boat. And the boat has direction, structure, momentum. It knows where it's going. It knows how to get from point A to point B. But the ocean is where the depth and the power and the pull comes from. And a boat with no ocean is just a boat on land. And therefore it can't move. So it can't get to its next destination. And in sales, when we try to sell purely from a masculine energy, we become the boat with no ocean. We have all these tactics, we have all these scripts, we have the objection handling, but there's no depth or flow or connection guiding that boat to its end location. And people can feel when a sale has no soul in it. You really, really can. And this is why a lot of men that are really good at selling have lent into a more like a mixture of that, and having both masculine and feminine energy when selling is so important. And that's why a lot of men, you see a lot of them have lent into having a little bit more feminine energy, actually being good at listening and not being so presumptuous, because they've learned that actually that isn't going to work. So, and spiritually, there is something very profound about the fact that women we are the givers of life. Like, as the givers of life, we are naturally attuned to what other people need, to the unsaid or the emotional undercurrent of a conversation. Now I'm going to talk about why the masculine selling model is dying in its own way. Okay, so bear with me a second, because this is an interesting one. So the traditional masculine model of selling is becoming, in my opinion, less and less effective. And it's not just my opinion as well. Like, the research backs this up. And when I'm saying this, I'm absolutely not saying that men aren't good at selling, because I know so many men in sales who are incredible. And in fact, I recently had a coach / mentor who was a man and is insane. And I've worked with so many men in sales who are sensational. And they are happy to have a mixture of both masculine and feminine selling. That's what they need. But the masculine way of selling is dying out, just the masculine. It really, really is, because buyers today are more informed than ever. They've already Googled your offer. They've maybe read your reviews. They might even know what it costs. They don't need to be convinced by some slick script. What they need to do is they need to feel like they can trust you. They need to feel like there's safety there. that the person that they're buying from genuinely understands them and genuinely cares about whether this is right for them. And research consistently shows that 74% of customers are more likely to buy when they feel truly heard, not when they've been through a great presentation. When they feel heard, that's when the sale is more likely to appear. And the era of this high pressure, never take no for an answer closer it really is ending. I've seen so much of it, and it's not happening anymore. Not because people have gone soft either, but because buyers, we are smart. They can smell desperation. I can smell desperation straight away. They can feel when someone is running out, like reading off of a script rather than just actually having a real conversation. And it puts people off, and they immediately don't want to work with you because it just feels like bish, bash, bosh, quickly get to the next one. And that's not how people buy anymore. And what the marketplace is moving towards is what women have always been naturally doing our whole lives: consultative selling, relationship-led selling that feels like a conversation between two human beings rather than a transaction. It's mothering. It's literally nurturing experience. And it is not a coincidence that this is the moment women are absolutely thriving in sales. The world is finally catching up to what we've always been wired for. We were designed to be natural caregivers and therefore naturally gifted at selling. We just are. And the world is finally waking up, and it's so exciting. It's amazing. I'm loving watching so many women win in sales. It's just beautiful. So what this actually means for you. What does this all mean for you practically? You're probably thinking, okay, well, how is this going to help me? I try not to sell from my masculine. I really try to sell from my feminine, or I really try to have a mixture of both. And there's a few things that I want you to take away from this in order for you to really start tapping into being more creative in selling and actually enjoying the process as well. So first and foremost, stop trying to sell like the men that you watch on YouTube videos or that you see on shorts or you watch on reels. And in fact, being fully honest with you, I've said this before, unfollow anything like that. It's not worth it. Copying this aggressive objection handling tactics, the pressure-based follow-up sequence, and these very tactical scripted approaches, it always will feel wrong to you because it is wrong for you. It is not your biology or your energy. It is not your superpower to tap into a masculine approach to selling. It's not going to feel right, and therefore you're going to hate doing it. So try and eradicate all of that and start tapping into leaning into the feminine. Secondly, trust your instincts on a call more. That feeling that you get when you know something shifted for someone, or there's that moment where you heard something under what they said and you knew exactly what they needed to hear, that is not luck. That is your oxytocin driven connection system working in real time. So you can trust it. Thirdly, stop apologizing for caring. I honestly hear this so much. In fact, this happened on one of my coaching calls this week. So many women feel like they care too much on sales calls and they get really invested and they just want to help. And then they worry that that makes them less professional or less powerful. Now, there's a real art to this. You obviously don't want to come across as desperate, 100%, but there is a lot of research that says that caring, that investment that you can give someone and that genuine interest in the other person's outcome is exactly what makes the best salesperson. So it is an important asset. I talk a lot about this inside my program, The Art of Selling, and how to have that real gentle mix of caring for your prospects, but also not caring too much that you remove the barrier of being able to cross that and be able to sell. If you do want help with that, you can comment the word podcast or DM me the word podcast and I can send you a short video of exactly how I can help you with that. And then fourth is sell from connection rather than convincing. So your job on a sales call is not to convince someone of anything. It's to understand them so well and to listen so deeply, to be so present that they feel completely seen And when someone feels completely seen, they don't need convincing. They are in your world, they feel connected. They just need to work out if that's going to get them from point A to point B. So I hope this episode made you feel what I feel every single day when I think about selling as a woman. It is not a disadvantage. There's no gap to close or a weakness to overcome. We are completely unique and we have an extraordinary set of gifts that, when used intentionally, are more powerful than anything the masculine playbook could ever offered. You are wired for connection. You're wired for trust and to hear what's underneath what people say. And you are wired to make people feel so seen that buying from you feels like the most natural thing in the world. And if this resonated with you today and you want to go deeper, if you want to learn exactly how to sell from your intuition and build the business that feels as good as it performs, you can just DM me the word podcast on Instagram and I will send you everything. I'll send you a short video about how I help women do this inside the art of selling. So if you love this episode, please share it with one woman who needs to hear it. That is genuinely how this show reaches the women it's meant for. And please leave a comment about what you loved and anything you want me to cover. I absolutely love reading your comments in the comment section. And when people DM me about certain episodes, I've had so many DMs about last week's episode. It was so nice. I really do write these episodes pretty intentionally and based off of what clients say to me or what people message me about. I try and build the frame of each episode based off of that. So if you ever do want me to cover certain subjects or you're struggling with something, then just message me and reach out and I can start writing out an episode for that. So comment below if you need anything and I will see you all next week. Bye.